Commander Vex Thornpaw had seen many battles in his 47 cycles of life. He had watched entire star systems burn under the relentless assault of the Void Hunters. He had led his pack through asteroid fields so dense that even the most skilled pilots would have turned back. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for watching his cubs slowly waste away while he stood helpless. "Status report," he growled, his voice barely containing the rage that threatened to tear through his composure. Dr. Kira Moonwhisper, the pack's chief medical officer, approached with the kind of careful steps one uses around a wounded predator. Her silver fur was matted with exhaustion, and her usually bright amber eyes were dulled with defeat. 23 cubs affected so far, she said, her voice cracking slightly. The youngest is barely 2 cycles old. The oldest is your nephew, Zane. Vex felt his claws extend involuntarily. Zane was 15 cycles old, just reaching the age where he should have been learning to pilot his first fighter craft. Instead, the young wolf was lying in the medical bay, his once glossy black fur now patchy and dull, his breathing shallow and labored. "What is this disease?" Vex demanded. Though he had asked the same question dozens of times over the past week, Kira's ears flattened against her head. "We still don't know. It attacks the respiratory system first, then spreads to the nervous system. The cubs lose their appetite, their strength, and then..." She didn't need to finish. They both knew what came next. How long? At this rate, maybe 3 days. 4 if we're lucky. Vex turned away, staring out at the vast expanse of space through the observation deck's massive viewport. His pack, the mighty Thornpaw clan, had dominated this sector for generations. They were feared warriors, skilled hunters, proud beings who had never backed down from any challenge. And now they were being brought to their knees by something they couldn't even see. The irony wasn't lost on him. They had survived the Great Plague of 2387, the Harvester invasions, even the notorious Black Nebula incident where half his fleet had been lost to gravitational anomalies. But this microscopic enemy was proving more deadly than any weapon the galaxy had thrown at them. "Sir," came a voice from behind him. It was Lieutenant Ray's Swiftclaw, his communications officer. The young wolf looked nervous, which was unusual. Ray's had once delivered a casualty report while under heavy fire without so much as a tremor in his voice. "What is it?" Vex asked, not bothering to turn around. "We've received a response to our distress signal," Ray's said carefully. It's from the humans." Vex slowly turned, his yellow eyes narrowing. The humans, those bizarre, hairless bipeds who had somehow managed to carve out their own little corner of the galaxy despite being one of the youngest species to achieve interstellar travel. Most of the older races considered them curiosities at best, nuisances at worst. "The humans want to help us?" Vex asked, his tone dripping with skepticism. "Apparently, they have experience with similar diseases. They're offering to send a medical team." "Doctor," Moonwhisper perked up slightly. "Any help at this point?" "From humans?" Vex interrupted. "What could those soft, weak creatures possibly know about our physiology? They don't even have proper claws or fangs. They can't even see in the dark properly." "With respect, Commander," Kira said, her voice gaining some of its old strength. "Our cubs are dying. If the humans think they can help, shouldn't we at least consider it?" Vex was about to dismiss the idea entirely when another voice cut through his thoughts. It was the voice of his sister, Maya, transmitted from the medical bay. "Uncle Vex?" The voice was weak, barely audible through the comm system. "Is that you?" His heart clenched. Maya was only 12 cycles old, and she was Zane's younger sister. The disease had taken her first 3 days ago. "I'm here, little star," he said, his voice gentling despite his inner turmoil. "I had a dream about the humans," she whispered. There was one with kind eyes and gentle hands. He made the pain go away. Vex closed his eyes, feeling the weight of command, of family, of failure pressing down on him like the gravity of a collapsed star. In the background, he could hear the soft whimpering of other cubs in the medical bay, their parents trying desperately to comfort them. "How long until the human ship arrives?" he asked finally. 12 hours, Ray's replied promptly. 12 hours, Vex repeated. He looked at Kira. "How many more cubs will we lose in 12 hours? Kira's silence was answer enough. 6 hours later, Vex found himself pacing the corridors of his flagship like a caged predator. He had tried to sleep, tried to eat, tried to focus on tactical reports. Nothing worked. Every few minutes, updates would come from the medical bay, and each one was worse than the last. 2 more cubs had taken ill. The youngest affected was now barely 18 months old, a tiny female named Luna, whose parents had already lost 2 older children to various conflicts. The thought of telling them they might lose their last remaining cub made Vex's stomach turn. "Commander," came Reyes' voice over the intercom. "The human vessel has just dropped out of hyperspace. They're requesting permission to dock." Vex straightened his uniform and made his way to the docking bay. Whatever these humans thought they could do, he would at least hear them out. For Maya, for Zane, for all the cubs whose future hung in the balance, the human ship was unimpressive. That was the kindest word Vex could think of. Where Thornpaw vessels were sleek and predatory, built for speed and aggression, the human craft looked like something cobbled together from spare parts. It was boxy, functional, and about as aesthetically pleasing as a broken asteroid. "Ugly little thing, isn't it?" commented Captain Jade Ironclaw, his second in command, as they watched the vessel maneuver toward the docking clamps. "Aesthetics mean nothing if they can save our cubs," Vex replied, though privately he agreed. The docking process took longer than expected. Human ships, it seemed, used different connection protocols than the standard galactic configurations. More evidence of their technological backwardness, Vex thought. Finally, the airlocks synchronized, and the human delegation came aboard. Vex had expected a large team, maybe a dozen specialists with advanced equipment. Instead, 3 humans walked through the airlock, carrying what looked like simple medical bags. The leader was a male, average height for his species, with graying hair and lines around his eyes that spoke of long years and hard experience. He wore simple medical scrubs rather than any kind of impressive uniform. Behind him came a female with short dark hair and quick intelligent eyes, and another male who looked barely out of adolescence. "Commander Thornpaw?" "But," the lead human asked, extending his hand in what Vex knew was their species' greeting gesture. "I'm Dr. Marcus Webb, and these are my colleagues, Dr. Sarah Mitchell and Dr. Tommy Banks." Vex looked at the extended hand for a moment before reluctantly taking it. The human's grip was firm, but his skin was soft, almost delicate compared to a Thornpaw's tough hide. "Dr. Webb," Vex acknowledged. "I must admit, I expected a larger team." Dr. Webb smiled, and there was something in that expression that reminded Vex of Maya's dream. "Sometimes less is more, Commander. We've found that smaller teams can move more quickly and adapt more easily to unexpected situations. And you believe you can help our cubs?" "We're going to try our best," the female, Dr. Mitchell, interjected. "We've dealt with similar respiratory and neurological symptoms in various species. The key is usually identifying the pathogen and understanding how it interacts with the host's immune system." Dr. Banks, the younger human, was already scanning the corridor with some kind of handheld device. "Interesting atmospheric composition," he murmured. "Higher oxygen content than Earth standard, trace amounts of xenon that could affect how certain pathogens behave." Vex exchanged a glance with Captain Ironclaw. The humans seemed competent enough, but they were so small, so fragile looking. How could creatures that looked like they might break in a strong wind possibly succeed where Thornpaw medicine had failed? "If you'll follow me," Vex said, "I'll take you to our medical bay." The walk through the ship's corridors was awkward. The humans kept stopping to examine various things, asking questions about air circulation, lighting, even the metal composition of the walls. To Vex, it seemed like they were more interested in the ship itself than in the medical emergency at hand. "Fascinating," Dr. Webb murmured as they passed through a section where the artificial gravity fluctuated slightly due to some minor technical issues. "How long have you been experiencing these gravity variations?" "It's a minor malfunction," Vex said dismissively. "Our engineers will fix it when they have time." "When did it start?" Dr. Mitchell asked. Vex frowned. "I don't see how that's relevant to—" "About 2 weeks ago," Captain Ironclaw interrupted, "right around the time we entered this system." The 3 humans exchanged meaningful looks. "What?" Vex demanded. Probably nothing, Dr. Webb said, but his tone suggested otherwise. Let's see the patients first. The medical bay was a scene that would haunt Vex's nightmares for the rest of his life. 23 cubs lay in various stages of the disease's progression, their parents hovering nearby with expressions of desperate hope and growing despair. The sound of labored breathing filled the air, punctuated by the occasional weak whimper. Dr. Moonwhisper approached them, her exhaustion even more apparent in the harsh medical lighting. "Doctors," she said, inclining her head respectfully. "Thank you for coming. I'm afraid the situation has worsened since we sent our distress call." Dr. Webb nodded grimly, his eyes already scanning the room. "May we examine some of the patients?" "Of course." The humans moved through the medical bay with quiet efficiency. Dr. Webb went to the most severely affected cubs, his hands gentle as he examined them with what appeared to be primitive tools. A simple stethoscope, a small light, basic scanning devices that looked laughably outdated compared to Thornpaw medical technology. But as Vex watched, he noticed something strange. The cubs seemed to calm under the human's touch. Even little Maya, who had been restless and uncomfortable for days, seemed to relax as Dr. Webb examined her. "Hello, sweetheart," the human doctor said softly, his voice carrying that same gentle quality Vex had heard in Maya's dream. "I know you don't feel well, but we're going to try to help you, okay?" Maya's eyes fluttered open, and for the first time in days, she managed a weak smile. Dr. Mitchell was examining some of the older cubs, while Dr. Banks seemed to be more interested in the environmental systems of the medical bay itself. He was taking readings from air vents, checking the filtration systems, even examining the water supply connections. "Dr. Moonwhisper," Dr. Webb said after completing his initial examinations, "could you show me your test results? Blood work, tissue samples, anything you've collected?" Kira led them to her workstation, where holographic displays showed detailed analyses of the cubs' conditions. The data was comprehensive, thorough, and completely baffling. Every test had been run multiple times, every possibility explored. Dr. Webb studied the data for several minutes, his brow furrowed in concentration. Finally, he looked up. "This is definitely a pathogenic infection," he said. "But the pathogen itself, island unusual." "Unusual how?" Vex demanded. "It's adapting," Dr. Mitchell said, looking up from her own analysis. "See these genetic markers? The pathogen is actually changing its approach as your immune systems respond to it." "That's impossible," Dr. Moonwhisper protested. "Pathogens don't adapt that quickly." "Most don't, Doctor," Banks said from across the room. "But this one isn't most pathogens. Commander, I need to ask you something. Has your ship been anywhere near the Kepler debris field recently?" Vex felt a chill run down his spine. "We passed through the outer edges about 3 weeks ago. How did you?" "Because we've seen this before," Dr. Webb said grimly. "On 3 different worlds, affecting 4 different species. Always the same pattern: respiratory symptoms progressing to neurological involvement, always affecting the youngest members of the population first." "And the connection to the Kepler debris field?" Captain Ironclaw asked. "That's where it comes from," Dr. Mitchell said. "The pathogen hitched a ride on your ship when you passed through the field. It's been slowly adapting to your species' biology ever since." "Then you know how to cure it?" Vex asked, hope and skepticism warring in his voice. Dr. Webb was quiet for a long moment. "We know how to fight it," he said finally. "But it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be pleasant." "I don't care about pleasant," Vex growled. "I care about saving these cubs." "Then we need to get to work," Dr. Webb said, rolling up his sleeves. "Dr. Banks, start setting up the atmospheric processors. Dr. Mitchell, I need you to begin synthesizing the treatment compounds. And Dr. Moonwhisper," he looked at the Thornpaw physician with newfound respect, "I'm going to need your help. This is going to require combining human techniques with Thornpaw physiology, and you know your people better than anyone." As the humans began their work, Vex found himself watching Dr. Webb with growing curiosity. The human moved with quiet confidence, his hands steady despite the obvious gravity of the situation. When he spoke to the cubs, his voice was gentle and reassuring. When he worked with the other doctors, his commands were clear and decisive. Maybe, just maybe, these strange, soft creatures might actually be able to help. But as Vex watched the humans prepare their equipment, a new worry began to gnaw at him. What if they were too late? What if even human medicine couldn't save his nephew, his sister, all the precious cubs who represented the future of his pack? In the corner of the medical bay, little Maya coughed weakly, and Vex felt his heart break a little more. The humans had 12 hours to prove themselves, 12 hours to save his family, 12 hours to show that sometimes the most unlikely allies were exactly what you needed. What happened next defied every expectation Vex had about human capabilities. Dr. Banks had somehow managed to completely reconfigure the medical bay's atmospheric systems in under 2 hours. The young human moved like his life depended on it, connecting devices that looked like they belonged in a scrapyard to the ship's main environmental controls. "Are you sure this won't poison us all?" Captain Ironclaw asked nervously, as strange-smelling gases began filtering through the vents. "Relax," Dr. Banks said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "It's just introducing specific trace elements that will make it harder for the pathogen to maintain its adaptive mutations. Think of it as changing the rules of the game while the enemy is still learning how to play." Meanwhile, Dr. Mitchell had turned Dr. Moonwhisper's pristine laboratory into what could only be described as controlled chaos. Vials bubbled, machines hummed, and the air filled with the sharp scent of chemical reactions. "This is barbaric," Kira muttered, watching the human female work with equipment that looked primitive compared to Thornpaw technology. "Barbaric, maybe," Dr. Mitchell replied without looking up, "but effective. Sometimes the old ways work better than the fancy new ones." Dr. Webb was the most fascinating to watch. He moved from cub to cub with the patience of a saint and the precision of a master craftsman. His hands never shook, his voice never wavered, and somehow he managed to get even the sickest cubs to cooperate with his examinations. "How is he doing that?" Vex asked Dr. Moonwhisper, as they watched Webb coax little Maya into taking a small sip of some foul-smelling liquid. "I have no idea," Kira admitted. "She hasn't been able to keep anything down for 2 days. "It's called bedside manner," came a voice from behind them. They turned to see Dr. Mitchell approaching with a tray of vials filled with various colored liquids. Marcus has been practicing medicine for 37 years. He's seen everything, treated everyone. Cubs, pups, hatchlings, spawn, and doesn't matter the species. Sick younglings are sick younglings. And these treatments will work on our physiology?" Vex asked, eyeing the vials suspiciously. "They should," Dr. Mitchell said. "We've adapted our standard protocols based on your biological data. The trick isn't just killing the pathogen. It's doing it without killing the patient." As if to prove her point, one of the monitoring devices attached to Zane began beeping frantically. The 15-cycle-old's vital signs were crashing. Dr. Webb appeared at his bedside almost instantly, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. "I need adrenaline analog stat," he called out. "We don't have human adrenaline," Dr. Moonwhisper said, panic creeping into her voice. "Not human adrenaline," Webb replied calmly, preparing a syringe with steady hands. "Thornpaw combat stimulant, diluted to 1/10 normal concentration. That could kill him." "So we'll doing nothing," Webb said, meeting her eyes steadily. "Trust me." The injection went in smoothly, and for a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then Zane's vital signs began to stabilize, and his breathing became less labored. "How did you know that would work?" Vex demanded. "Because I've treated Volcari younglings with similar symptoms," Webb replied, never taking his eyes off his patient. "Their combat stimulants have a nearly identical molecular structure to yours. Sometimes experience across species pays off." Over the next several hours, the humans worked with a coordination that bordered on telepathic. Dr. Banks continued modifying environmental systems throughout the ship, not just in the medical bay. Dr. Mitchell synthesized treatments tailored to each cub's specific condition, and Dr. Webb worked miracles. One by one, the cubs began showing signs of improvement. It wasn't dramatic, no sudden recoveries or miraculous awakenings. But their breathing became easier, their fever broke, and some even began to show interest in food again. "It's working, Doctor," Moonwhisper whispered, staring at her readings in amazement. "I can't believe it, but it's actually working." "Believe it, Doctor," Mitchell said with a tired smile. We've done this before. But Vex noticed that Dr. Webb didn't share in the celebration. The human doctor continued working with the same intense focus, checking and rechecking his patients. What's wrong? Vex asked him directly. Webb paused in his examination of a small male cub named Frost. We're winning, he said carefully. But we're not done yet. This pathogen is tricky. It might try one last adaptation push before it gives up. Meaning? Meaning we need to stay vigilant for at least another 12 hours. If we can keep them stable that long, they'll recover fully. As if summoned by his words, alarms began blaring throughout the medical bay. Several cubs who had been showing improvement suddenly took turns for the worse, their vital signs spiking, dangerously. It's adapting again, Dr. Banks shouted from his position at the environmental controls. The pathogen is trying a completely different approach. I can see that, Dr. Webb snapped, moving rapidly between patients. Sarah, I need modified compounds, and I need them now. Working on it. Doctor, Mitchell replied, her hands flying over her makeshift laboratory equipment. Vex watched in horrified fascination as the humans kicked into an even higher gear. Their previous efficiency had been impressive, but this was something else entirely. They moved like a single organism with 3 bodies, each anticipating what the others needed before they even asked. Tommy, redirect the atmospheric processors to configuration 7. Webb called out while simultaneously administering injections to 2 different cubs. Already on it, Banks replied, his fingers dancing across control panels with impossible speed. Sarah, the little female in bed 12, is showing neurological symptoms. Got it. Mixing neural stabilizers now. How do they know what to do? Captain Ironclaw asked in amazement. Experience. Doctor, Moonwhisper said, her voice filled with newfound respect. They've fought this pathogen before, and they know all its tricks. But even with their experience, the battle was touch and go. For every cub they stabilized, another seemed to take a turn for the worse. The pathogen was making one final, desperate attempt to establish itself, throwing every adaptation it had learned at its host simultaneously. Little Maya was the worst affected. Her temperature spiked so high that Vex could feel the heat radiating from her small body even from several feet away. Her breathing became so shallow that the monitors could barely detect it. Doctor, Webb worked over her with grim determination, trying treatment after treatment as her condition continued to deteriorate. Finally, he stepped back, his face pale with exhaustion and something that looked like defeat. I'm sorry, he said quietly to Vex. I've tried everything I know. If she doesn't respond to the next treatment, then try something you don't know, Vex said fiercely. Try something impossible. Try something stupid. I don't care what it. Island Webb looked at him for a long moment, then at Maya's still form. There is one thing, he said slowly. It's experimental, dangerous, and it's never been tried on a thornpaw before. Do it. The risk. I said do it. Webb nodded grimly and began preparing what looked like the most complex treatment yet. Multiple injections, atmospheric adjustments, even some kind of energy field, generated by a device Dr. Banks produced from his kit. What is that thing? Dr. Moonwhisper asked, staring at the device. Quantum resonance field generator. Dr. Banks replied, making adjustments with intense concentration. It disrupts cellular communications at the subatomic level. Should interfere with the pathogen's ability to coordinate its adaptive responses. Should? Vex growled. Will, Doctor. Webb corrected firmly. It will work. The treatment began, and Maya's vital signs went completely haywire. For 10 terrifying minutes, every monitor in the medical bay screamed warnings as her small body fought a battle that played out on levels invisible to the naked eye. Then, slowly, incredibly, her signs began to stabilize. Her breathing deepened, her temperature started to drop, and color began returning to her gray-tinged fur. She's responding, Dr. Moonwhisper gasped. But Dr. Webb wasn't finished. Moving with renewed energy, he began applying the same experimental treatment to the other cubs who were still struggling. One by one, their conditions improved, until finally, blessed silence fell over the medical bay as the last alarm shut off. Is it over? Captain Ironclaw asked. Dr. Webb checked his readings one final time, then sagged against a wall with exhaustion. "It's over," he confirmed. "The pathogen is dead, and your cubs are going to be fine." The celebration that followed was unlike anything Vex had ever witnessed on a military vessel. Grown warriors wept openly. Parents clutched their recovering cubs, and even the usually stoic medical staff couldn't contain their joy. But Vex found himself drawn to the three humans who had made it all possible. They sat quietly in a corner of the medical bay, looking like they might collapse from exhaustion at any moment. "Why?" he asked them simply. Dr. Webb looked up with tired but kind eyes. "Why what? Why did you help us? Our species barely know each other. We've never been allies, never traded, never even had formal diplomatic contact. Why risk your lives for our cubs?" The three humans exchanged glances, and Dr. Mitchell smiled. "Because they were children," she said simply. "And children are children, no matter what species they belong to. And because," Dr. Banks added with a grin, "someone has to stop that pathogen from spreading to other systems. Better to fight it here than wait for it to show up in human space." Dr. Webb nodded. "We've learned that in space, everyone is your neighbor eventually. Help when you can, because someday you might be the one who needs help." Vex stared at them for a long moment, these small, soft, allegedly weak creatures who had just saved his entire pack's future. "I owe you a debt that can never be repaid," he said formally. "No debt," Dr. Webb replied, struggling to his feet. "Just remember this when someone else needs help. Pass it forward." 3 days later, Vex stood in the same observation deck where he had first received news of the human offer to help. The cubs were all recovering well, running around the ship and getting into trouble just like healthy young ones should. Maya had even managed to convince the galley staff to give her extra dessert rations by claiming her illness had left her nutritionally deficient. The human ship was preparing to depart, its ugly, functional lines somehow looking more beautiful to Vex than the sleekest Thornpaw destroyer. "Commander," came Ray's voice over the intercom. "Dr. Webb is requesting a final communication. Put him through." The human doctor's face appeared on the main screen, looking much better after 3 days of rest. "Commander Thornpaw," he said with a smile. "We're ready to depart. How are your cubs doing?" "Driving their parents crazy with their energy," Vex replied. "Which I'm told is exactly what healthy cubs are supposed to do." Webb laughed. "Sounds about right. Listen, I wanted to give you some information about that pathogen. We've transmitted all our data to your medical staff, but there are a few things you should know." "I'm listening." "That gravity malfunction you mentioned, it wasn't a malfunction. The pathogen was affecting your ship's systems too, trying to create optimal breeding conditions. You might want to run a full systems diagnostic, just to be safe." Vex made a mental note to have his engineers check everything twice. "Anything else?" "Just this," Webb said, his expression becoming serious. "You're going to get requests for help from other species who have encountered this pathogen. When you do, please consider responding. You now have more experience fighting it than anyone except us, and we can't be everywhere at once." The implications hit Vex like a thunderbolt. "You're asking us to become healers?" "I'm asking you to become the kind of people who help when help is needed," Webb replied. "Your species has incredible strengths, Commander. Courage, loyalty, determination. Those same qualities that make you formidable warriors also make you potential healers." After the communication ended, Vex found himself thinking about the humans' words. The Thornpaw clan had built their reputation on strength in battle, on never backing down from a fight. But maybe, just maybe, there were different kinds of strength worth exploring. A small voice interrupted his thoughts. "Uncle Vex?" He turned to see Maya approaching, her eyes bright and her steps steady for the first time in weeks. "Yes, little star. When I grow up," she said with the absolute certainty that only children possess, "I want to be like Dr. Webb. I want to help cubs who are sick." Vex knelt down to her level, looking into eyes that held a determination he recognized from his own mirror. "You know what, Maya? I think that's exactly what our pack needs." As the human ship jumped to hyperspace, leaving only a brief distortion in the starfield, Vex made a decision that would change the Thornpaw clan forever. They would still be warriors, still be hunters, still be the fierce protectors they had always been, but they would also be healers. And in the vast, dangerous galaxy they all shared, that might just be the most important job of all. Months later, when the first distress call came from a Zalarian colony ship whose younglings had fallen ill with a familiar-sounding disease, Commander Vex Thornpaw didn't hesitate. "Set course for the Zalarian vessel," he ordered, "and prep the medical bay." "Sir?" his new communications officer asked. "Are we really going to help them?" Vex smiled, thinking of 3 humans who had taught him that sometimes the most unlikely allies were exactly what you needed. "Pass it forward," he said simply. That's what Dr. Webb would say. And as his ship changed course toward another species' cry for help, Vex couldn't help but think that the galaxy had just become a little bit smaller, and a whole lot safer, thanks to the humans who had rolled up their sleeves when his cubs needed them most.